Introduction. Have you ever felt exhausted? Not because your day was difficult, but because your mind simply refused to be quiet? Nothing terrible happened. No major crisis. No life-changing event. Yet from the moment you opened your eyes, your thoughts never stopped moving. You replayed yesterday's conversation. You worried about tomorrow's problems. You imagined situations that might never happen. And somehow, by the end of the day, it felt as though you had been carrying an invisible weight for hours. Here's something worth considering. What if the greatest source of stress in your life isn't the world around you, but the endless conversation happening inside your own mind? What if peace isn't something you find, but something you build, one thought at a time? In this audiobook, we'll explore how positive psychology can help you quiet mental noise, stop feeding unnecessary worry, and replace exhausting thought patterns with healthier ones. Not by pretending life is perfect, but by learning to think in a way that gives your mind room to breathe. Chapter 1. When your mind becomes your loudest enemy. Imagine arriving home after a long day. You place your keys on the table. The house is quiet. The television is off. Your phone isn't ringing. Everything around you is finally still. Yet inside your head, the noise has only just begun. You remember something awkward you said this morning. You wonder whether your boss misunderstood your email. You think about a bill that needs to be paid next week. Then your mind jumps to a conversation from 3 years ago, a decision you wish you had made differently, a future that hasn't happened yet. Within minutes, your body is sitting safely on the couch, but your mind is traveling through time. This is one of the most common habits of the human brain. It rarely stays where your life actually is. Instead, it drifts backward into regret or forward into uncertainty. Very little time is spent in the present moment. Positive psychology begins with a surprisingly simple observation. Our thoughts are not always an accurate reflection of reality. They are interpretations, predictions, stories. Sometimes those stories help us grow. Sometimes they quietly drain our energy without us even noticing. Think about the last time someone didn't reply to your message. Before you had any facts, your mind probably began creating explanations. Maybe they're upset with me. Maybe I said something wrong. Maybe they don't want to talk anymore. Hours later, you discover they simply left their phone at home. Nothing in reality had changed. Only the story inside your mind had. This happens every day. Our brains naturally try to fill in missing information. Unfortunately, they often fill those empty spaces with fear instead of truth. The more often this happens, the more exhausting ordinary life becomes. Not because life itself is becoming harder, but because your mind is carrying problems that don't actually exist yet. One of the greatest lessons from positive psychology is learning to notice this process before it takes control. The moment you catch yourself saying, "What if everything goes wrong?" you can pause. You can ask, "Do I know this is true, or am I only imagining it?" That single question creates space between you and your thoughts. And in that space, you regain something incredibly valuable: choice. Instead of automatically believing every anxious prediction, you begin observing it. Instead of fighting every uncomfortable feeling, you become curious about it. Little by little, your mind becomes less like a courtroom, where every thought is treated as unquestionable evidence, and more like a quiet library, where ideas can be examined carefully before they're accepted as truth. That change doesn't happen overnight. It begins with one simple habit: noticing what your mind is doing before your mind decides what your day will become. Chapter 2. The freedom of letting go. Imagine carrying a suitcase through an airport. At first, it doesn't seem like a problem. You grip the handle, you keep walking. A few minutes pass, then 10, then 20. The suitcase hasn't become any heavier, but your arm has. The weight stayed the same. The effort of holding it did not. Our minds work in much the same way. Many of the thoughts that exhaust us aren't especially heavy by themselves. It's the fact that we refuse to put them down. A disappointing conversation, a careless comment, a mistake from years ago, a decision you wish you could undo. None of these have the power to physically follow you, yet mentally, you carry them everywhere. Positive psychology invites us to ask a question that sounds almost too simple. Is this thought helping me, or am I simply holding on to it? Most people never stop to ask. Instead, they assume that if a thought keeps returning, it must be important. But repetition doesn't always mean importance. Sometimes it simply means habit. Think about how often your mind revisits the same worry. You analyze it from every possible angle. You replay conversations. You imagine different outcomes. You promise yourself that one more round of thinking will finally produce the perfect answer. But when you finish, the problem usually feels exactly the same. Only now, you're more tired than before. Dr. Marcus Penn explains that there is a difference between solving a problem and feeding it. Solving moves you forward. Overthinking keeps you standing in the same place while convincing you that you're making progress. It's like sitting in a rocking chair. You're constantly moving, yet you're never actually going anywhere. Many of us confuse motion with progress. The mind stays busy, so we assume we're being productive. In reality, we're simply rehearsing the same fears. One of the healthiest habits you can develop is learning to separate what you can influence from what you cannot. You can choose your response. You can choose your attitude. You can choose how honestly you speak, how consistently you act, and what meaning you give today's experiences. But you cannot control another person's opinion. You cannot rewrite yesterday. You cannot force certainty into tomorrow. The more energy you spend trying to control those things, the less energy remains for the parts of life that actually belong to you. Imagine a gardener caring for a young tree. They water it, protect it from weeds, make sure it receives sunlight, but they never stand beside it demanding, "Grow faster." They understand that healthy growth requires patience. Life asks us to show that same patience toward ourselves. You don't become peaceful by forcing your mind to stop thinking. You become peaceful by gently deciding which thoughts deserve your attention. This doesn't happen once. It happens dozens of times each day. Each time your mind wanders towards something you cannot change, you quietly bring it back, back to this moment, back to your next choice, back to the small action you can take right now. At first, that practice feels unnatural. Your mind will resist. It has spent years believing that worrying is the same as preparing. But gradually, something begins to change. The thoughts still appear, yet they no longer take control. You notice them, you acknowledge them, and then, instead of following them wherever they lead, you let them pass. That is what letting go truly means. Not forgetting, not pretending the pain never existed, but refusing to give every difficult thought a permanent place to live inside your mind. And as you practice that choice, again and again, you begin to discover something remarkable. Peace isn't found when life becomes free of problems. Peace begins the moment you stop carrying problems that were never yours to hold. Chapter 3. Replace the voice that tears you down. Imagine two people making the exact same mistake. Both forget an important appointment. Both disappoint someone they care about. Both wish they could go back and do things differently. From the outside, their situations look almost identical, but inside, something completely different is happening. The first person says to themselves, "I'm so irresponsible. I always mess things up. Why can't I ever get anything right?" The second person pauses. They take a deep breath and think, "That was a mistake. I need to make it right. What can I learn from this?" One mistake, two completely different conversations, and eventually, two completely different lives. Positive psychology teaches us that the voice inside our heads is never neutral. It is either helping us grow or quietly convincing us to stay where we are. Many people assume that being hard on themselves is the key to improvement. They believe criticism creates discipline. They think kindness toward themselves will only make them lazy. But research has shown something surprising. People who practice self-compassion often recover from setbacks more quickly than those who rely on constant self-criticism. Why? Because shame consumes energy. Growth requires it. Imagine trying to climb a hill while carrying a heavy backpack filled with stones. Every step becomes harder, not because the hill is impossible, but because you're carrying unnecessary weight. Negative self-talk works the same way. Every harsh sentence becomes another stone. I'm not smart enough. I'll probably fail. Other people are naturally better than me. At first, they seem like harmless thoughts. Over time, they become beliefs, and beliefs quietly shape behavior. If you believe you'll fail, you stop trying as often. If you believe you're not good with people, you avoid conversations. If you believe change is impossible, you stop looking for opportunities to grow. The mind begins creating evidence to support the story it already believes. That is why the stories you repeat matter so much. This doesn't mean pretending everything is wonderful. Positive thinking is not blind optimism. It isn't standing in the middle of a storm and pretending the sky is blue. It is choosing thoughts that are both honest and helpful. Instead of saying, I always fail, you might say, this didn't go the way I hoped, but I can improve. Instead of, I'm terrible at this. Try, I'm still learning. Notice the difference. Neither statement ignores reality. Both acknowledge the challenge, but only one leaves room for growth. Dr. Marcus Penn reminds us that our minds believe what they hear most often. If every day begins with criticism, your confidence slowly erodes. If every challenge becomes proof that you aren't enough, eventually you'll stop seeing possibilities altogether. That's why it's important to become aware of your inner dialogue. Not to judge it, but to notice it. The next time you catch yourself speaking harshly inside your own mind, pause for a moment. Ask yourself, would I say these exact words to someone I deeply care about? If the answer is no, why are they acceptable when directed toward yourself? Treating yourself with compassion doesn't lower your standards. It gives you the strength to meet them. Real growth isn't fueled by self-hatred. It's fueled by patience, by honesty, and by the quiet belief that every mistake is an opportunity to become a little wiser than you were yesterday. The way you speak to yourself today will become the way you face tomorrow. Choose those words carefully, because no one listens to your inner voice more often than you do. Chapter 4, Gratitude, changes what your mind looks for. Imagine waking up tomorrow morning, and the very first thing your mind does is begin making a list. Not of what's missing, not of everything that's gone wrong, but of everything that is already good. At first, it sounds almost too simple. How could a few grateful thoughts possibly change the way you experience life? After all, your problems would still be there. Your responsibilities wouldn't disappear. The difficult conversations waiting for you would still happen. So what difference could gratitude really make? The answer begins with understanding how your brain works. Your mind is constantly searching for evidence, evidence that supports whatever it already believes. If you spend every day looking for disappointment, you'll find it. If you expect people to let you down, you'll notice every broken promise. If you believe life is unfair, your attention will naturally settle on every setback. The brain is remarkably efficient. Once it decides what's important, it filters everything else into the background. Positive psychology doesn't ask you to ignore life's difficulties. It asks you to train your attention. Because where attention goes, emotion often follows. Think about buying a new car. The moment you decide on a particular model, you suddenly begin seeing it everywhere. The cars were always there. Your attention simply wasn't looking for them before. Gratitude works in a similar way. The more intentionally you notice what's going well, the easier it becomes to notice even more of it. This doesn't mean pretending every day is wonderful. Some days are painful. Some seasons of life are genuinely difficult. Positive psychology never asks us to deny reality. Instead, it reminds us that reality is usually larger than our problems. Imagine standing in a beautiful garden. In one corner, a few weeds are growing. You could spend the entire afternoon staring at those weeds, complaining about them, worrying about them, thinking they have ruined the entire garden. Or you could remove them, then lift your eyes to the flowers that were there all along. The weeds exist, but they are not the whole picture. Neither are your struggles. One of the simplest exercises Dr. Marcus Penn recommends is ending each day by asking yourself, what went well today? Not, was today perfect? Because it wasn't. Not, did everything go according to plan? Because life rarely works that way. Simply, what went well? Perhaps someone smiled at you. Perhaps your child laughed. Perhaps you finished a task you had been avoiding. Perhaps you enjoyed a quiet cup of coffee before the day became busy. These moments seem ordinary, yet together they quietly reshape the way your brain interprets life. Research in positive psychology has consistently shown that practicing gratitude improves emotional well-being over time. Not because gratitude changes your circumstances overnight, but because it changes the lens through which you experience those circumstances. Many people postpone gratitude. They tell themselves, I'll be grateful when I get the promotion. I'll be grateful when I earn more money. I'll be grateful when life becomes easier. But happiness built on future conditions is always delayed. There will always be another goal, another problem, another reason to wait. Gratitude gently interrupts that cycle. It reminds you that joy doesn't always arrive after success. Sometimes success becomes easier because you've already learned to appreciate where you are. Another powerful habit is expressing gratitude to other people, not just thinking it, saying it. A sincere thank you. A message telling someone how much their kindness meant. A few honest words spoken at the right moment. These small acts do more than strengthen relationships. They remind your own mind that goodness exists, that generosity exists, that even in difficult seasons, there are still reasons to hope. Over time, gratitude becomes less like an exercise and more like a way of seeing the world. The problems don't disappear, but they no longer become the only story your mind knows how to tell. And perhaps that's one of the greatest gifts positive psychology offers. Not a perfect life, but a mind that's finally able to notice that even imperfect lives are filled with moments worth appreciating. Chapter 5. Stop fighting every negative thought. Imagine standing beside a river. Leaves drift across the surface one after another. Some are large, some are small. Some disappear within seconds. Others float slowly downstream. Now imagine trying to stop every single leaf. You reach into the water. You grab one. Another appears. You catch that one too. Soon, you're no longer watching the river. You're struggling against it. This is exactly how many people treat their own thoughts. The moment an unpleasant thought appears, they panic. Why am I thinking this? I shouldn't feel this way. What's wrong with me? The thought itself may last only a few seconds, but the battle against it can continue for hours. Positive psychology offers a different perspective. Not every thought deserves your attention, and not every thought deserves your belief. This is one of the most liberating ideas you can ever learn. Because many people unknowingly assume that if a thought appears, it must be true. If they think, I'm going to fail, they treat it like a prediction. If they think, nobody appreciates me, they accept it as reality. If they think, I'll never change, they begin living as though that future has already been decided. But thoughts are not facts. They are mental events. Nothing more, nothing less. Imagine sitting in a movie theater. A frightening scene appears on the screen. Your heart begins to race. You feel tension in your body. Even though another part of you knows it's only a movie, the emotions are real. But the story isn't. Your mind often works in the same way. It creates vivid stories, some hopeful, some frightening, some completely imaginary. Yet if you never pause to question them, they begin directing your emotions. Dr. Marcus Penn explains that one of the healthiest mental habits is learning to observe your thoughts instead of immediately obeying them. This small shift changes everything. Instead of saying, I'm an anxious person, you begin saying, I'm noticing an anxious thought. Instead of, my future is going to fall apart, you begin saying, my mind is imagining a difficult future. Notice the difference. The thought hasn't disappeared, but you are no longer trapped inside it. You are observing it. That distance creates freedom. Many people spend years trying to eliminate every negative thought. Unfortunately, the harder you try not to think about something, the more your brain returns to it. Think about what happens if someone says, "Whatever you do, don't think about a pink elephant." Almost instantly, the image appears. Not because you wanted it to, because that's how attention works. The same thing happens with worry. When you desperately try to push a thought away, you often give it even more importance. Positive psychology encourages a gentler response. Notice the thought, acknowledge it, then decide whether it deserves your time. Some thoughts are useful. They help you solve problems. They remind you of responsibilities. They encourage growth. Others simply create unnecessary fear. Learning the difference is an essential skill. One helpful question to ask is this thought helping me move forward? If the answer is yes, stay with it, learn from it, take action. If the answer is no, you don't have to argue with it. You don't have to prove it wrong. You can simply let it pass, like another leaf floating down the river. This doesn't mean difficult thoughts will never return. They probably will. The goal isn't to build a silent mind. The goal is to build a wiser relationship with your mind. Over time, you'll notice something remarkable. The thoughts that once controlled your entire day begin losing their influence. Not because they've disappeared, but because you've stopped treating every passing thought as a command you must follow. Chapter 6. Slow down and let your mind catch up. Imagine you're driving through a thick fog. The road is still there. The destination hasn't changed. But because you can't see very far ahead, your instinct is to press harder on the accelerator. It sounds irrational, yet that's exactly what many people do with their minds. When life feels uncertain, they think faster, worry harder, analyze longer, as if more mental speed will somehow create more clarity. In reality, the opposite is usually true. The faster your mind races, the less clearly it sees. Positive psychology reminds us that a calm mind isn't an empty mind. It's a mind that has learned when to slow down. Think about the last time you had an important decision to make. Perhaps it involved changing jobs, ending a relationship, making a financial commitment, or choosing between two very different paths. What did your mind do? It probably started listing every possible outcome, every possible risk, every possible mistake. Hour after hour, the same questions circled through your thoughts. Yet despite all that thinking, you felt no closer to an answer. Why? Because clarity rarely appears in a mind that's constantly rushing. Have you ever noticed that your best ideas often arrive when you're doing something completely unrelated? While taking a shower, walking outside, driving home, washing the dishes. Those moments aren't magical. Your brain hasn't suddenly become smarter. It's simply quieter. When your mind stops chasing answers, it finally has room to discover them. Dr. Marcus Penn explains that we often mistake constant mental activity for productivity. We believe that if we're thinking, we must be making progress. But there is a difference between productive reflection and endless mental spinning. Imagine shaking a snow globe. At first, everything inside becomes cloudy. You can't see anything clearly. The harder you keep shaking it, the longer it stays that way. But the moment you place it on a table, the snow begins to settle. Little by little, the picture becomes visible again. Your mind works much the same way. When every moment is filled with notifications, social media, news, emails, endless conversations, and constant stimulation, your thoughts never have a chance to settle. No wonder so many people feel overwhelmed. It's difficult to hear your own wisdom when your mind is surrounded by noise. This is why moments of stillness are so important. Not because doing nothing is productive by itself, but because stillness creates space, space for perspective, space for creativity, space for emotional recovery. Many people avoid silence. The moment they're alone, they reach for their phone, turn on the television, play music, or find another distraction. Not because they enjoy the noise, because silence forces them to meet their own thoughts. At first, That can feel uncomfortable, but discomfort isn't always something to escape. Sometimes it's an invitation to understand yourself more deeply. Positive psychology encourages us to create intentional pauses throughout the day. A few quiet minutes in the morning, a slow walk without headphones, a meal without checking your phone, a few deep breaths before answering an important email. These moments seem insignificant, yet over time, they retrain your mind to slow down, and something remarkable begins to happen. You stop reacting to every thought, you stop chasing every worry, you become less controlled by urgency and more guided by intention. The world around you may still be busy. Deadlines will still exist. Unexpected problems will still appear. Life doesn't suddenly become slower, but your relationship with it changes. Instead of feeling as though you're constantly being pulled in every direction, you begin choosing where your attention goes. That choice is powerful because attention is one of the few things you truly own. Where you place it will shape how you experience your life. A quiet mind isn't created by escaping the world. It's created by learning that not every moment demands an immediate response. Sometimes the wisest thing you can do is stop, breathe, wait, and allow your mind enough silence to remember what peace feels like. Chapter 7. Your thoughts are not always telling the truth. Imagine receiving an unexpected email. Your manager writes, "Can we talk tomorrow morning?" That's all. No explanation, no details. Just one short sentence. Within seconds, your mind begins writing a story. Did I do something wrong? Am I about to lose my job? Maybe everyone has noticed my mistakes. You spend the rest of the evening worrying. You sleep poorly. You imagine conversations that haven't happened. Then the next morning, you discover your manager simply wanted to ask if you'd be interested in leading a new project. Nothing outside of you had changed, only the story inside your head. This happens more often than most of us realize. Our brains dislike uncertainty. Whenever information is incomplete, the mind naturally tries to fill in the missing pieces. The problem is, it often fills those gaps with fear instead of facts. Positive psychology encourages us to become more aware of this habit, not because negative thoughts are unusual, but because they are often inaccurate. A thought can feel completely convincing and still be wrong. Think about a cloudy day. The sun hasn't disappeared. It's simply hidden behind the clouds. In the same way, a fearful thought doesn't automatically become reality. It's only one possible interpretation. Yet many people treat every anxious thought as if it were undeniable truth. Dr. Marcus Penn explains that one of the most powerful tools for creating a quieter mind is learning to question your thinking. Not every thought deserves your trust. Some deserve your curiosity instead. The next time you notice yourself thinking, "Everything is falling apart," pause for a moment. Ask yourself, what evidence do I actually have? Not what you're imagining, not what you're afraid of. What do you truly know? You may discover that your mind has quietly mixed facts with assumptions. Perhaps someone looked serious. That is a fact. You concluded they were angry with you. That is an assumption. Perhaps a friend hasn't replied to your message. That is a fact. You decided the friendship is ending. That is a story. The ability to separate facts from interpretations changes the way you experience almost every challenge. Imagine wearing a pair of glasses with dark lenses. After a while, you forget you're even wearing them. The whole world begins to look darker. Not because the world changed, but because the lens did. Our beliefs work exactly the same way. If you believe people cannot be trusted, you'll notice every disappointment. If you believe you're never good enough, every mistake becomes proof. If you believe nothing ever works out, your attention naturally ignores the moments that contradict that belief. Your mind isn't trying to hurt you. It's trying to stay consistent with the story it already knows. Positive psychology gently invites us to update those stories, not by replacing every negative thought with an unrealistic positive one, but by asking, is there another explanation? Maybe that person wasn't ignoring you. Maybe they're overwhelmed. Maybe this setback isn't the end. Maybe it's simply one difficult chapter. That question creates possibility, and possibility creates hope. Another helpful practice is recognizing common thinking traps. Some people expect the worst before anything has happened. Others assume they know what everyone else is thinking. Some judge themselves by one bad day, as though a single moment defines an entire life. These habits feel automatic because they've been repeated for years. But habits can change every time you pause, every time you question an anxious story, every time you choose evidence over assumption. You're teaching your brain a new way to respond. Slowly, the fearful voice begins losing its authority, not because it never speaks again, but because you've learned not to believe everything it says. That may be one of the greatest gifts you can give yourself, a mind that still notices difficult thoughts, but no longer mistakes every one of them for the truth. Chapter 8. Build a mind that looks for possibilities. Imagine two people losing their jobs on the very same day. They walk out of the same building, carry the same cardboard box, receive the same final paycheck. From the outside, their situations are identical. But inside, two very different stories begin. The first person thinks, "This proves I'll never be successful. Nobody will hire someone like me. Everything I've worked for is falling apart." The second person feels the same disappointment, the same uncertainty, the same fear. But after allowing those emotions to settle, they ask themselves a different question. What opportunity might this create? What have I been wanting to change? What can I learn from this experience? Neither person is pretending the situation isn't painful. Both are facing the same reality. The difference lies in the meaning they choose to give it. Positive psychology teaches that while we cannot always control what happens to us, we have far more influence over how we interpret what happens. That interpretation quietly shapes our future. Think about a child learning to walk. They fall, again and again. No parent watches a toddler fall and says, "Well, I guess walking just isn't for you." Of course not, because falling is understood as part of learning. Yet somewhere along the way, many adults lose that perspective. One setback becomes proof they're not capable. One rejection becomes evidence they aren't good enough. One failure becomes a permanent label. Dr. Marcus Penn reminds us that resilient people don't experience fewer failures. They simply explain those failures differently. Instead of asking, "Why does this always happen to me?" they ask, "What is this experience trying to teach me?" That small shift changes everything. One question searches for reasons to give up. The other searches for reasons to keep growing. Imagine climbing a mountain. Halfway up, the path becomes steep. The weather changes. Your legs begin to ache. At that moment, you have two choices. You can see the difficulty as proof that you should turn around, or you can recognize it as evidence that you're finally reaching higher ground. The mountain hasn't changed. Only your perspective has. This doesn't mean every difficult experience is secretly wonderful. Some losses hurt deeply. Some disappointments leave scars. Positive psychology never asks us to deny pain. Instead, it asks us not to let pain become our identity. There is a difference between saying, "I failed," and saying, "I am a failure." One describes an event. The other defines a person. One leaves room for another attempt. The other quietly closes the door before you've even tried again. Words matter, especially the words you use to describe yourself. Another habit that strengthens resilience is celebrating small victories. Many people only allow themselves to feel proud after achieving something extraordinary. A promotion, a new house, a major milestone. Until then, they believe they haven't accomplished enough. But progress rarely arrives in giant leaps. It usually arrives in small, almost invisible steps. Getting out of bed when yesterday felt overwhelming. Having one difficult conversation you've been avoiding. Choosing to respond calmly instead of reacting in anger. Taking a short walk instead of remaining trapped in worry. These moments may seem ordinary, yet they are the building blocks of lasting change. Every healthy habit begins as something small. Every confident person once practiced tiny acts of courage. Every peaceful mind was built one thought at a time. Dr. Penn encourages us to become collectors of progress rather than collectors of perfection. Perfection is always moving further away. Progress is available today. The next time something doesn't go according to plan, pause before deciding what it means. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" try asking, "How can this help me become stronger?" You may not find the answer immediately. That's okay. Growth is rarely instant, but by asking a better question, you've already begun walking in a better direction. And over time, those better questions create better habits. Better habits create a healthier mind, and a healthier mind begins noticing possibilities where it once saw only problems. Chapter 9. The people around you shape the voice inside your head. Imagine placing a single healthy plant in a dark room. You water it every day. You care for it. You give it everything you think it needs. Yet week after week, it struggles to grow. Now move that same plant beside a window where sunlight reaches it every morning. Nothing about the plant has changed, only the environment around it. Before long, new leaves begin to appear. Fresh growth follows. The lesson is simple. Growth is never determined by effort alone. Environment matters. The same is true for your mind. Positive psychology reminds us that our thoughts don't develop in isolation. They're influenced every day by the people we spend time with, the conversations we have, the books we read, the news we consume, and even the voices we choose to listen to. Imagine beginning every morning by reading alarming headlines, one crisis after another, one prediction after another, one reason to worry after another. Then, throughout the day, you scroll through social media, comparing your life to carefully edited moments from strangers. By evening, you wonder why your mind feels restless. Your brain has been surrounded by anxiety for hours. It's simply learned the emotional language of its environment. Dr. Marcus Penn explains that the mind is constantly absorbing patterns. Whether we realize it or not, we begin thinking like the people we listen to most. If you're surrounded by constant criticism, self-criticism begins to feel normal. If every conversation focuses on problems, your attention naturally starts searching for problems too. But the opposite is equally true. When you're surrounded by encouragement, growth begins to feel possible. When you're around people who look for solutions instead of excuses, your own thinking slowly starts to change. This doesn't mean avoiding anyone who is struggling. Compassion is important. Supporting others matters. But there is a difference between helping someone and allowing constant negativity to become the atmosphere you live in every day. Think about how you feel after spending an hour with different people. Some conversations leave you energized. You walk away feeling hopeful, motivated, inspired to become a better version of yourself. Other conversations leave you emotionally exhausted. Every topic becomes a complaint. Every opportunity becomes a reason why something won't work. Every dream is met with doubt. Without realizing it, you begin carrying their emotional weight home with you. Positive psychology encourages us to become intentional about the influences we invite into our lives. Ask yourself a simple question. Who helps me become my best self? Not who entertains you. Not who always agrees with you, but who encourages growth, who challenges you with kindness, who reminds you of your strengths when you've forgotten them. Those relationships become emotional sunlight. They don't remove every storm, but they help you keep growing through them. The same principle applies to the information you consume. Every book, every podcast, every conversation, every video, each one quietly plants seeds inside your mind. Some seeds grow into confidence. Others grow into fear. If you constantly feed your mind with anger, fear, comparison, and hopelessness, those thoughts eventually become familiar. But if you intentionally feed it wisdom, gratitude, curiosity, and hope, your inner world slowly begins to change. This doesn't happen overnight. Just as one healthy meal doesn't transform your body, one positive conversation doesn't completely transform your thinking. But repeated daily, small influences become powerful habits. Over time, you begin noticing something remarkable. The voice inside your head becomes gentler. The future feels less frightening. Challenges become easier to face, not because life has become easier, but because your environment has been teaching your mind a healthier way to respond. Perhaps one of the most important decisions you'll ever make is deciding what deserves your attention. Because whatever repeatedly captures your attention eventually begins shaping your thoughts, and your thoughts quietly become the life you experience every single day. Chapter 10. Choose action over endless thinking. Imagine standing at the edge of a swimming pool. You've read books about swimming. You've watched instructional videos. You've listened to experienced coaches explain every technique. You understand how your arms should move, how your breathing should work, how your legs should kick. There's only one problem. You've never entered the water. No matter how much you've learned, you still don't know how to swim. Life often works the same way. Many people spend years preparing to change. They wait until they feel confident, until they stop feeling afraid, until they know exactly what to do, until the timing feels perfect. But that day rarely comes. Dr. Marcus Penn reminds us that confidence is usually the result of action, not the requirement for it. Most of us believe the order looks like this. First, I become confident. Then, I take action. In reality, life often works in the opposite direction. You take one small action. That action creates a little confidence. That confidence makes the next action easier. Little by little, momentum begins replacing fear. Think about learning to ride a bicycle. Nobody becomes balanced by reading about balance. Children wobble, they fall, they scrape their knees. Yet each attempt teaches their brains something new. Eventually, without even realizing it, balance becomes natural. The same principle applies to almost every challenge in life. Whether you're trying to build healthier habits, improve your relationships, or quiet an anxious mind, progress begins with movement, not perfection. One of the greatest traps of overthinking is believing that another hour of thinking will finally produce certainty. Sometimes it will. Most of the time, it simply produces more thinking. Imagine trying to navigate through a dark forest. You can stand at the entrance, studying every possible path, trying to predict every obstacle. Or you can take one careful step forward. That single step reveals something you couldn't see before. The next step reveals even more. Clarity often arrives through movement, not before it. Positive psychology encourages us to focus on what psychologists sometimes call small wins. These are actions so manageable that your brain has little reason to resist them. Instead of deciding, I'm going to completely change my life, you decide, today I'll take a 10-minute walk. Instead of saying, I'll never worry again, you practice 5 minutes of mindful breathing. Instead of waiting for motivation, you begin with consistency. Small actions may seem insignificant, but they have a remarkable effect on the mind. Every completed action quietly sends a message. I'm capable. I can keep promises to myself. Progress is possible. Those messages become new evidence. Evidence that slowly replaces the old stories you've been carrying for years. Many people underestimate the power of tiny improvements. Imagine improving just 1% each day, on any single day. The difference is almost invisible. But after months of consistent effort, the change becomes impossible to ignore. That's how healthy minds are built, not through dramatic transformations, but through ordinary choices repeated consistently. Dr. Penn also reminds us that action interrupts anxiety. When your mind is trapped in endless prediction, your attention stays inside your head. Action brings it back into the present. You stop imagining life and begin participating in it. That doesn't mean fear disappears. Often, you'll still feel uncertain. You'll still hear the familiar voice asking, what if this doesn't work? The difference is, you no longer allow that voice to make every decision. You acknowledge it, then you take the next step anyway. Because courage isn't the absence of fear. It's choosing movement despite it. As your actions begin to align with your values, something unexpected happens. Your mind becomes quieter, not because you've solved every problem, but because you've stopped asking your thoughts to do the work that only action can accomplish. Sometimes, the smallest step forward does more for your peace of mind than 1,000 hours of worrying ever could. Chapter 11. Become your own inner coach. Imagine watching a young child learning to tie their shoes. They try once, the knot falls apart. They try again, still not quite right. Again and again. Now imagine standing beside that child and saying, "You're hopeless. You'll never figure this out. Everyone else can do it except you." Most people would never speak to a child that way. Not because the child doesn't need to improve, but because encouragement helps people grow far more than constant criticism. Yet every single day, millions of adults speak to themselves with exactly those words. Positive psychology asks us an important question. If kindness helps others become stronger, why do we believe cruelty will make us stronger? Dr. Marcus Penn explains that one of the greatest obstacles to inner peace is becoming your own harshest critic. Many people think they're motivating themselves. In reality, they're slowly destroying their own confidence. Think about the way you react after making a mistake. Perhaps you forgot something important, missed a deadline, lost your temper, or made a poor decision. What happens next? For many people, the mistake ends, but the punishment continues. The mind begins replaying the event again and again and again. Every replay comes with another sentence. I should have known better. I always ruin things. Why can't I be more like everyone else? Notice something interesting. The mistake happened only once, but your mind keeps creating it over and over again. The original event lasted a few minutes. The emotional suffering lasts for days. This is why self-compassion is so powerful. It doesn't erase mistakes. It prevents unnecessary suffering from growing around them. Imagine two athletes losing the same competition. The first spends the next month calling themselves a failure. The second studies what happened, accepts the disappointment, then returns to training. Which one is more likely to improve? Not the one with the louder inner critic, the one with the wiser inner coach. A coach doesn't ignore mistakes. A good coach points them out honestly. But they also remind you that one bad performance doesn't define your potential. Dr. Penn encourages us to replace judgment with curiosity. Instead of saying, "I'm terrible at this," ask, "What can this experience teach me?" Instead of, "I failed again," try, "What would I do differently next time?" The goal isn't to avoid responsibility. The goal is to make responsibility useful. Criticism often stops growth. Curiosity creates it. Another habit of mentally healthy people is recognizing effort. Our minds naturally focus on what still needs improvement, rarely on how far we've already come. Imagine climbing a mountain. Every few minutes, you stop. Not to admire the view behind you, but to complain about how far you still have left to go. Eventually, the journey begins to feel impossible. Now imagine turning around, looking at everything you've already climbed. Suddenly, the distance ahead feels different. Not because the mountain became smaller, because you've remembered your own progress. Life works exactly the same way. Many people forget to celebrate growth because they're too busy chasing perfection. Positive psychology reminds us that progress deserves recognition, even when it's small, especially when it's small. One healthier decision, one calmer response, one day with a little less anxiety than yesterday. Those moments matter because lasting change is never built in giant leaps. It's built through hundreds of ordinary moments repeated consistently. There will still be days when you struggle, days when your old habits return, days when your inner critic speaks louder than your inner coach. That doesn't mean you failed. It means you're human. Growth isn't measured by never falling. It's measured by how gently you help yourself stand up again. Over time, something beautiful begins to happen. The voice inside your mind becomes less demanding, less fearful, less judgmental, and more encouraging, more patient, more hopeful. You begin speaking to yourself the way a trusted friend would, with honesty, with compassion, and with the quiet confidence that improvement is always possible. Because the relationship you have with yourself will quietly become the foundation for every other relationship in your life. Chapter 12. Happiness is a skill you can practice. Imagine meeting two people at the end of the same difficult year. Both experienced unexpected setbacks. Both lost opportunities they were counting on. Both faced moments of uncertainty that tested their confidence. Yet one of them still smiles easily, still laughs with friends, still finds moments of peace in ordinary days. The other feels emotionally drained. Every challenge seems to confirm that life has become harder. What explains the difference? Many people would say one person is simply luckier or naturally more positive. Dr. Marcus Penn offers another possibility. Perhaps happiness isn't something we accidentally find. Perhaps it's something we intentionally practice. This idea surprises many people. We've been taught to think of happiness as a reward, something that arrives after success, after the promotion, after finding the right relationship, after buying the house, after solving every problem. But if happiness always depends on future circumstances, then it is always one step ahead of us. Positive psychology encourages a different way of thinking. Instead of asking, what needs to happen before I can feel happy? It asks, what habits help create happiness today? That question changes everything because it moves happiness from the future into the present. Think about physical fitness. No one expects to become healthy after exercising once. We understand that health is built through daily choices. A short walk, a balanced meal, enough sleep. Consistency matters more than perfection. Emotional well-being follows the same principle. Your mind becomes stronger through repeated habits, not occasional breakthroughs. One of those habits is learning to notice positive experiences while they're happening. This sounds simple, but our brains are naturally designed to pay more attention to danger than to comfort. Thousands of years ago, this helped human beings survive. Missing a beautiful sunset carried very little risk. Missing the sound of a predator could cost your life. Our brains still carry that ancient survival system today. As a result, negative experiences often leave a deeper impression than positive ones. One criticism can outweigh 10 compliments. One disappointment can overshadow an entire week of good moments. Positive psychology doesn't try to erase this tendency. Instead, it teaches us to balance it. When something good happens, pause. Stay with the experience for a few extra moments. Really notice it. The warmth of the morning sunlight, a meaningful conversation, the satisfaction of completing a task, the laughter of someone you love. These moments often disappear because we rush past them. Not because they aren't meaningful, but because we're already thinking about what's next. Dr. Penn suggests that happiness grows when we become fully present for these ordinary experiences. Life isn't made up of extraordinary moments alone. Most of it is wonderfully ordinary. The smell of fresh coffee, rain against the window, a peaceful evening walk, a kind word from a stranger. These moments may never appear in a highlight reel, yet together, they quietly shape the quality of your life. Another important habit is celebrating progress instead of waiting for perfection. Many people postpone joy until they reach a distant goal. But every meaningful journey is made up of small victories. Finishing one difficult task, choosing patience over frustration, showing kindness when it would have been easier to react with anger. These moments deserve recognition, not because they're dramatic, because they are evidence of growth. Positive psychology reminds us that happiness is not the absence of struggle. It is the ability to continue finding meaning. Even while life remains imperfect, there will always be challenges, unexpected changes, moments of loss. No amount of positive thinking can remove those realities, but your response to those realities can become healthier, kinder, more resilient. Over time, you'll notice something beautiful. You stop chasing happiness as though it's waiting somewhere in the future. Instead, you begin creating it. One grateful thought, one meaningful conversation, one intentional choice at a time. And eventually, you realize that happiness was never something you had to find. It was something you had been quietly building all along. Chapter 13, Choosing Hope Every Single Day. Imagine two travelers beginning the exact same journey. Both carry the same map, both walk the same road, both face the same rain, the same hills, and the same unexpected detours. Yet at the end of the journey, one remembers only the blisters, the delays, and everything that went wrong. The other remembers the breathtaking views, the strangers who offered kindness, the lessons learned along the way. The road was identical, only their attention was different. This is one of the most important lessons in positive psychology. Hope is not the belief that nothing bad will ever happen. Hope is the decision to keep looking for possibility, even when life feels uncertain. Dr. Marcus Penn reminds us that every morning, our minds begin asking questions. Sometimes we don't even realize it. What will go wrong today? What should I be worried about? What if I fail? Without noticing. Those questions direct our attention, and wherever attention goes, our emotions quietly follow. Imagine walking into a crowded room looking for someone wearing a blue shirt. Within seconds, you'll probably find them. Not because there are suddenly more blue shirts, but because your mind knows what it's searching for. Now imagine spending each day looking for evidence that life is unfair, that people can't be trusted, that nothing ever works out. Your brain will become remarkably good at finding proof, not because those things are the whole truth, but because they have become your focus. Positive psychology encourages us to ask different questions. What opportunity exists inside this challenge? Who showed me kindness today? What did I handle better than I did a year ago? These questions don't deny life's difficulties. They simply remind your brain to notice the parts of reality that fear often ignores. Another powerful practice is accepting that every day doesn't have to be extraordinary. Many people believe happiness should feel exciting all the time. If today feels ordinary, they assume something is missing. But most meaningful lives are built through ordinary days. A quiet breakfast, a productive afternoon, an honest conversation, a peaceful evening walk. These moments rarely make headlines, yet they quietly become the memories we treasure most. Dr. Penn explains that joy often grows in places where we're patient enough to notice it. Not in dramatic achievements, but in simple experiences we usually overlook. The warmth of sunlight through a window, the sound of laughter in another room, the comfort of returning home after a long day, the feeling of taking a deep breath after carrying stress for too long. These moments are available to almost everyone. The question is whether we're present enough to see them. Hope also requires trust. Not necessarily trust that everything will happen exactly as we planned, but trust that we can handle whatever life places before us. There is an important difference. Many people spend years trying to guarantee a perfect future. Positive psychology suggests building something even more valuable: confidence in yourself. Confidence that no matter what tomorrow brings, you will learn, you will adapt, you will continue moving forward. That kind of hope is far stronger than wishful thinking. It doesn't depend on luck. It depends on resilience. As this chapter comes to an end, take a moment to ask yourself one simple question. What am I teaching my mind to look for every day? Because your answer to that question quietly shapes the way you experience your entire life. If you teach your mind to search only for danger, it will become an expert at finding it. But if you teach it to notice growth, kindness, opportunity, and gratitude, those things will slowly become easier to see. And over time, you'll discover that hope isn't something you wait to feel. It's something you practice. One thought, one choice, and one ordinary day at a time. Chapter 14. The peace that comes from living in the present. Imagine sitting down for dinner with your family. The food is warm. The conversation has started. Someone is laughing across the table, yet your body is there, while your mind is somewhere else. You're thinking about tomorrow's meeting, the bill that's due next week, the mistake you made this morning, or the conversation you wish had gone differently. The meal ends. Everyone stands up, and suddenly you realize you weren't really there at all. How many moments of our lives disappear this way? Not because they weren't meaningful, but because our minds were too busy living somewhere else. Dr. Marcus Penn reminds us that one of the greatest thieves of happiness is the habit of abandoning the present moment. The past pulls us toward regret. The future pulls us toward anxiety. Meanwhile, the only place where life is actually happening is quietly ignored. Positive psychology isn't about forgetting yesterday, nor is it about refusing to prepare for tomorrow. Instead, it teaches us to stop living everywhere except today. Think about a beautiful sunset. No photograph can fully capture it. No description can completely explain it. You have to be present to experience it. The same is true for almost every meaningful part of life. A conversation with someone you love, a child's laughter, the feeling of finishing something you've worked hard for, the calm that arrives during a quiet walk. These experiences cannot be enjoyed in advance, nor can they be relived forever. They only exist in one place, the present. Yet the human mind constantly tries to escape it. Imagine carrying your phone with dozens of applications running at the same time. Eventually, the battery drains faster. Everything begins slowing down. Your mind works similarly. When one part of your attention is replaying yesterday, another is worrying about tomorrow, and another is comparing yourself to someone else. Very little attention remains for what is happening right now. No wonder so many people feel mentally exhausted. Their minds are trying to live in 3 different timelines at once. Dr. Penn encourages us to practice returning to the present, not once, but again and again. Every time you notice your thoughts drifting into endless worry, pause, take one slow breath, look around, notice what you can see, what you can hear, what you can feel. These simple actions gently remind your brain, I'm here, I'm safe, this moment deserves my attention. Many people believe mindfulness requires sitting silently for an hour. It doesn't. Mindfulness can happen anywhere, while drinking your morning coffee, while washing the dishes, while walking through a park, while listening to someone without planning your reply. It isn't about doing something different. It's about being fully present in what you're already doing. There is another reason the present moment matters so much. Action only exists here. You cannot make yesterday kinder. You cannot complete tomorrow's work today. Every meaningful decision is made in this moment. Every healthy habit begins now. Every kind word is spoken now. Every deep breath happens now. The present is where change lives. Dr. Penn often reminds readers that peace is not hidden somewhere in the future. Many people say, I'll relax after this project. I'll be happy after I earn more money. I'll finally enjoy life when everything settles down. But life rarely settles down completely. One goal leads to another. One challenge is replaced by the next. If peace always depends on perfect circumstances, it remains permanently out of reach. Instead, learn to find small moments of stillness in ordinary days. Notice the warmth of sunlight on your face. Listen to birds singing instead of rushing past them. Take a deep breath before opening your laptop. Watch the rain without immediately reaching for your phone. These moments may seem insignificant, yet together, they quietly teach your nervous system something powerful. Not every moment is a problem to solve. Some moments are simply meant to be lived. The more often you practice returning to the present, the less power yesterday begins to hold over you, the less frightening tomorrow appears. And slowly, without even realizing it, life begins feeling less like something you're trying to survive, and more like something you're finally able to experience. Because peace has never been hiding in another place or another time. It has always been waiting in the only moment you truly have. This one. Chapter 15. The quiet mind is built one choice at a time. Imagine standing in front of 2 paths every single morning. The first path feels familiar. It's the path of rushing, checking your phone before you even get out of bed, thinking about everything that could go wrong, replaying yesterday before today has even begun. The second path is quieter. You pause for a single breath. You notice the morning light coming through the window. You remind yourself that today hasn't happened yet, and that whatever it brings, you will meet it one step at a time. Both paths begin in exactly the same place. The difference lies in one small decision. Which direction will your mind take? Many people believe that inner peace arrives all at once, that one day they'll wake up and suddenly feel calm, confident, free from worry. But Dr. Marcus Penn reminds us that lasting peace is rarely a dramatic event. It's a habit, built through hundreds of ordinary choices that nobody else ever sees. Think about learning a new language. You don't become fluent after one lesson. You learn one word, then another. Some days you improve quickly. Other days, it feels as though you've forgotten everything. Yet if you continue showing up, the progress quietly accumulates. A peaceful mind grows in exactly the same way. No single grateful thought changes your life. No single mindful breath transforms your future. No single act of kindness removes every fear. But repeated day after day, those small actions reshape the way your mind experiences the world. Positive psychology calls this intentional practice, the understanding that your brain is constantly changing according to what you repeatedly do. Every time you choose gratitude, you're strengthening one pathway. Every time you pause before reacting, you're strengthening another. Every time you challenge a fearful thought instead of automatically believing it, your mind learns a healthier pattern. At first, these choices require effort, just as learning to write once required effort, or riding a bicycle, or driving a car. Eventually, what once felt difficult becomes natural. Many people become discouraged because change isn't immediate. They practice mindfulness for a week, then conclude it isn't working. They keep a gratitude journal for a few days, then stop because life still feels stressful. But imagine planting an apple tree. Would you dig it up every morning to check whether the roots are growing? Of course not. You water it, you protect it, you trust the process. Real growth often happens where you cannot see it. The same is true for your mind. Every healthy habit leaves a small imprint, too small to notice today, perhaps too small to notice next week. But after months or years, you suddenly realize something has changed. Situations that once overwhelmed you no longer do. Conversations that once kept you awake all night now pass without taking your peace. Problems still exist, but your relationship with them has become different. That is real transformation. Another important lesson Dr. Penn emphasizes is patience. We are often patient with everyone except ourselves. We understand that children need time to learn. We understand that trees need years to grow. We understand that physical wounds require time to heal. Yet when it comes to our own emotional growth, we expect immediate results. When they don't appear, we assume we've failed. Growth doesn't work that way. There will be mornings when anxiety returns, days when old habits feel stronger than new ones, moments when your inner critic speaks louder than your inner coach. Those moments do not erase your progress. They are simply reminders that growth is never a perfectly straight line. It moves forward, then pauses. Sometimes it even feels as though it's moving backward. But every time you choose awareness instead of automatic reaction, you are still moving in the right direction. Perhaps the greatest gift of positive psychology is this. It doesn't promise a life without difficulty. It promises something much more valuable, a mind that knows how to meet difficulty without becoming consumed by it. A mind that understands peace is not created by perfect circumstances. It is created by daily practice. One thought, one habit, one decision at a time. And as those small choices continue to accumulate, you'll begin to notice that the life you've been searching for hasn't appeared because the world changed. It has appeared because you did. Chapter 16. Your mind can become your safest place. Imagine coming home after one of the hardest days you've had in months. Nothing went as planned. You argued with someone you care about. A project fell apart. The future suddenly feels uncertain. You close the front door behind you. The house is silent. For a moment, everything around you is finally still. Then your mind begins speaking. The question is, what does it say? For many people, this is where the second wave of suffering begins. The difficult day has already happened, but now comes the judgment. You should have handled it better. You're falling behind. things are only going to get worse. The event is over, yet the mind continues creating pain long after reality has moved on. Dr. Marcus Penn reminds us that one of the greatest goals of positive psychology is not to eliminate hardship. It is to transform the relationship you have with yourself during hardship. Because difficult days are unavoidable. The voice that greets you afterward is something you can slowly change. Imagine your closest friend walking into your home after experiencing exactly the same day. Would you greet them by saying, "I told you this would happen. You always make the wrong decisions. You'll never figure your life out"? Of course not. You would probably invite them to sit down. Listen to what happened. Offer encouragement. Remind them that one difficult day doesn't define an entire life. Yet many people deny themselves that same compassion. Positive psychology encourages us to become the kind of person our own mind can safely come home to. A place where mistakes are acknowledged, but not exaggerated. Where emotions are welcomed, but not allowed to control every decision. Where failure becomes information, not identity. This doesn't happen through positive affirmations alone. It happens through repeated daily choices. Choosing patience instead of panic, curiosity instead of judgment, progress instead of perfection. Little by little, the atmosphere inside your mind begins to change. Think about the homes you've visited throughout your life. Some immediately made you feel relaxed. The conversation was gentle. People listened. You felt accepted. Other places made you tense the moment you walked through the door. You felt as though you had to be careful. Careful what you said. Careful what you did. Careful not to make a mistake. Now ask yourself a different question. What kind of home has your mind become? When something goes wrong, does your mind welcome you with understanding or with criticism? When you face uncertainty, does it encourage you or immediately predict failure? Your internal environment matters just as much as your external one because you carry it with you everywhere. Dr. Penn explains that emotional resilience isn't built by avoiding uncomfortable emotions. It's built by creating enough inner stability to experience those emotions without becoming overwhelmed by them. Imagine the ocean during a storm. The waves on the surface become enormous. They crash into one another with tremendous force. But deep beneath the surface, the water remains remarkably calm. The storm exists, yet it doesn't reach the deepest part of the ocean. Your mind can become like that. Thoughts will continue to appear, some joyful, some painful. Life will continue bringing unexpected changes, some welcome, some heartbreaking. The goal isn't to stop the waves. The goal is to strengthen the depth beneath them. Positive psychology teaches that depth grows through practice. Every mindful breath, every grateful thought, every act of self-compassion. Every moment you choose understanding instead of self-judgment. These choices may seem small, but together they create emotional strength. Not the kind of strength that never feels pain. The kind that knows pain will eventually pass, as this journey begins drawing toward its conclusion. Perhaps the most important lesson is this. You cannot always choose the experiences life gives you, but you can gradually shape the environment inside your own mind. And when your mind becomes a place of wisdom instead of fear, a place of patience instead of constant pressure, a place of hope instead of endless criticism, you discover something remarkable. Peace was never waiting somewhere outside you. It was quietly growing inside you, one gentle thought at a time. Chapter 17. A quiet mind creates a better life. Imagine reaching the end of a long day. You sit by the window. The sun is beginning to disappear beyond the horizon. For the first time in hours, there is nothing demanding your attention. No emails, no deadlines, no conversations waiting for a reply. Just a few quiet moments. Now ask yourself a simple question. How does it feel to be alone with your own mind? For many people, that question is surprisingly uncomfortable. Silence becomes filled with unfinished thoughts, old regrets, future worries, a constant stream of questions with no immediate answers. But Dr. Marcus Penn reminds us that this isn't how the mind was designed to remain forever. A peaceful mind isn't a gift reserved for a fortunate few. It is something that can be cultivated, one habit at a time. Throughout this journey, we've explored many different practices, learning to recognize the difference between facts and fearful stories, replacing harsh self-criticism with compassion, choosing gratitude over constant comparison, focusing on what you can control instead of what you cannot, returning your attention to the present moment, taking action instead of becoming trapped in endless thinking. At first, these ideas may have seemed separate, individual exercises, different techniques. Together, they are all pointing toward the same destination, a healthier relationship with your own mind. Because the greatest change doesn't happen when life suddenly becomes easier. It happens when your mind begins responding differently to life. Imagine two people standing in the rain. Neither can stop the storm. Neither can control the weather. But one spends the entire walk complaining about every drop. The other notices the smell of fresh air, the sound of rain on the trees, the cool breeze against their face. Both become wet, yet only one experiences the journey with peace. Positive psychology isn't about pretending storms don't exist. It's about remembering that even during difficult seasons, there is still beauty worth noticing. There is still meaning worth discovering. There is still hope worth protecting. Dr. Penn encourages us to think of the mind as a garden. Whatever you repeatedly plant will eventually grow. If you plant constant fear, fear becomes familiar. If you plant endless comparison, contentment becomes difficult. If you plant gratitude, patience, hope, curiosity, those qualities slowly begin spreading through every part of your life. The remarkable thing about gardens is that they don't change overnight. Growth is almost invisible from one day to the next, but return after months of patient care, and the transformation becomes undeniable. The same is true for your inner world. Some mornings, you'll still wake up feeling anxious. Some days, old habits will return. Some evenings, your thoughts will once again become loud. That doesn't mean you failed. It simply means you're still growing. Every healthy mind continues learning, continues adjusting, continues choosing peace. Again and again. There is no final destination where you never experience stress again. There is only the quiet confidence that whatever life brings, you now have healthier ways to respond. Perhaps that is the greatest lesson of all. Peace isn't found by controlling every circumstance. It isn't earned by becoming perfect. It isn't waiting at the end of your next achievement. Peace grows every time you choose awareness over autopilot. Every time you replace judgment with understanding. Every time you return your attention to this moment. Instead of becoming lost in yesterday or tomorrow. As you continue beyond this audiobook, don't try to remember every sentence. You don't need to. Instead, remember the practices. Pause before believing every thought. Treat yourself with the same kindness you offer others. Protect what deserves your attention. Look for small moments of gratitude. Take the next small step instead of waiting for perfect certainty. And whenever your mind becomes noisy again, remember this. You don't have to believe every thought that enters your head. You only have to decide which ones deserve to stay. Because a quiet mind isn't built in a single day. It's built through thousands of small choices, made with patience, compassion, and hope, one day at a time. Conclusion: the quiet mind you have been searching for. Imagine meeting yourself 1 year from today. Not a different person, not someone with a perfect life, the same you, living in the same world, facing many of the same responsibilities. The difference is almost invisible. When problems appear, you no longer panic. When people disappoint you, you no longer carry their choices for days. When your inner critic begins speaking, you recognize its voice, but you no longer believe every word it says. You still experience difficult moments. You still feel sadness, frustration, fear, because those emotions are part of being human, but they no longer become permanent residents inside your mind. They arrive, they teach you something, then they leave. That is the quiet mind Dr. Marcus Penn has been describing throughout this journey. Not a mind without thoughts, not a mind without challenges, but a mind that no longer turns every challenge into unnecessary suffering. If there's one lesson to carry with you after finishing this audiobook, let it be this. You cannot always choose what life places in front of you, but every single day, you can choose the relationship you have with it. You can choose whether your thoughts become your master or your companion. You can choose whether one mistake defines your identity or simply becomes part of your education. You can choose whether your attention remains trapped in yesterday, lost in tomorrow, or gently returns to the only place where life is actually happening, this moment. Positive psychology has never promised a perfect life. It has never claimed that positive thinking will remove grief, prevent failure, or eliminate uncertainty. Instead, it offers something much more realistic: the ability to meet life with greater resilience, greater awareness, greater compassion, and greater hope. Remember the practices you've learned. Notice your thoughts before believing them. Focus your energy on what you can influence. Treat yourself with the same kindness you offer someone you love. Celebrate progress instead of chasing perfection. Practice gratitude even on ordinary days. Allow yourself to slow down. And whenever life feels overwhelming, return to one simple question: what is the next small thing I can do right now? Because peace is rarely found in giant breakthroughs. It is usually built through small decisions repeated consistently. One deep breath, one grateful thought, one kind word, one healthier choice, again and again and again. Eventually, those small moments become habits. Those habits become character. And that character quietly transforms the way you experience your life. As you leave this audiobook, don't worry about remembering every chapter. You don't need to. Instead, carry the mindset. A quieter mind begins with a gentler conversation. A gentler conversation creates healthier emotions. Healthier emotions lead to wiser choices, and wiser choices, made consistently over time, create a happier life. Perhaps the greatest surprise is this: the peace you've been searching for has never been hiding somewhere in the future. It has never depended on becoming richer, more successful, or finally reaching a life without problems. It has been waiting, patiently, for the moment you decide to stop fighting every thought, stop carrying every burden, and start treating your own mind as a place worth caring for. Thank you for sharing this journey. I hope these ideas remain with you long after this audiobook ends. And the next time your mind becomes noisy, remember, you don't have to silence every thought. You simply have to choose which thoughts deserve your attention. Because the quality of your life will always be shaped by the quality of the thoughts you choose to nurture. Until next time, take care of your mind, be patient with yourself, and never forget, a quiet mind is not something you find. It is something you practice every single day.